Boy, you're the face of the board, Kenny Manley.
You're not live yet, are you?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's not getting you that good.
Right? It's like that meme with Homer Simpson going back to the
Into the wood, into the bushes.
That was it. Kevin Durant's meeting. Crystal White.
Yeah.
Did you go to the college? Wow. I've already seen posts. You got 20 potential. And it's going mad. After it would be like 2 days. Yeah.
No, show 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not Sturgeon.
Yeah. Yeah, they're full. It can be every little thing.
$250,000.
You know, they're not worried about it. Well, they're all drinking though, so.
I don't know. That's how that goes.
Yeah, I wish it was that, that's not what it's saying.
Do you want to say anything? You can bring us some cards. I'll take those. Okay.
What's his board? I don't see anybody filming it yet. I was gonna say, I guess it's time to go.
Sounds like.
All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. If you will join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this time I'd entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second. First by Kalen, second by Rick. All those in favor? All those in favor? And that passes 6-0. Moving on to the MSBA delegate report.
Got video at all?
Mr. McCown.
Should I have Brent? Maybe.
While we're waiting on this, if any of you have not turned in your, if you wish to speak and you haven't turned in a card, you need to do so now, or you won't be called upon. So.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of August. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at efforts to provide greater internet access to students throughout Missouri. Currently, about 23% of Missouri students lack internet access at home, while 84 school districts report students lack physical access to broadband. The Director of Broadband Development for the state of Missouri, Tim Arbeiter, told an audience at MSBA's recent Igniting Great Ideas Summit, both infrastructure and affordability are barriers to access for many students and families. Arbeiter says school boards can play an important role in improving internet access by partnering with others in their community.
But sometimes, as leaders, you just need to take the bull by the horns and say, what do we need to do to come alongside maybe our city manager, our presiding commissioner, and a few other folks to help maybe strategize as a team, how do we motivate, incentivize, and attract a provider? Because there are areas in our state where there is none or only one provider, and it makes it an extreme challenge.
Arbeiter says there are a number of state and federal programs now in place aimed at expanding broadband access in Missouri. Applications are opening this month for grants aimed at addressing the teacher shortage in Missouri. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has designated more than $50 million in coronavirus relief funds to establish teacher recruitment and retention grants for school districts. The goals of the grants include attracting more people to the teaching profession and providing greater support for current teachers to improve retention. DESE Assistant Commissioner Paul Katnick tells us he hopes many of the grants will be used to expand what are known as Grow Your Own programs aimed at encouraging high school students to become teachers.
Future Missouri teachers are sitting in Missouri school districts right now. That's where they're gonna come from. And we've talked to way too many high school kids in school districts who never consider the teaching profession because no one's asked them if they would ever consider it. No one has said to a student, you would be a great teacher. I mean, you love math, you're good at it, you'd be a great math teacher. And we're not talking about valedictorian straight A students. Sometimes students that work hard in school make great teachers. And we as a profession have to think some succession planning here about furthering the profession after we're done.
Katnick says recruiting and retaining teachers must be a community effort.
It's not just a teacher who's agreed to run some club. It's a community effort because when a school can't find teachers, and we had examples of that this year where schools went virtual because they didn't have enough teachers, that impacts the whole community. So everybody in a community ought to care about this issue and band together and help support it. That's when it works at its best. That's what we've seen in districts with long-running programs. The entire community embraces it, and I just think school board members have such an important role in making it a priority, supporting superintendent and the school personnel and making it happen, making it work.
Katnick says Missouri's teacher shortage has only become worse during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that he has yet to talk to a school district leader who isn't facing teacher vacancies heading into the new school year. Registration is now open for the 2021 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators to be held November 5th through 7th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature numerous breakout sessions and workshops, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state, along with a great lineup of general session speakers, all in a new location at the Kansas City Convention Center. Among the general session speakers this year is Gene Becker, a Missouri Public School graduate who served as President George H.W. Bush's Chief of Staff from the time he left office until his death in 2018. And don't forget the 2021 Safe Schools and Colleges Forum, sponsored by MSBA Center for Education Safety, that will be held this year on November 4th in conjunction with the annual conference in Kansas City. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Do you have anything further, Darren?
Nope, just a reminder that we're just open enrollments now for the annual conference. So it's right here in our backyard this year, so it's kind of nice.
For now.
No.
All right, next up is our visitors forum. So we have 5 visitors. We all know what you're here for, so what we're going to do, I don't know who's for and who's against, okay? So I'll let whoever's for and whoever's against pick a speaker, and we'll do one speaker for each side, okay? We don't need to hear the same thing 100 times, so I don't know who is, we'll let Chad, whoever, if you're for or against, get your group, and whoever wants to speak on that can speak. So.
I thought everybody was supposed to have a chance to speak at 1 and 2.
Not when you have a large group, because we'll be here forever.
This is a large group.
Well, that's how we operate it. So, I mean, you guys can, you can speak for your group if you want, or you can pick somebody else. It's totally your guys' call.
Sure, I'll speak.
Okay. The way it works, for those who don't know, pardon me, you get 3 minutes. There'll be a timer on the clock to speak. The board will not answer questions. We'll thank you for your input, and we'll take it into consideration. Okay?
Should I stand in front of the microphone? Or?
You can stand right there. It's fine. Whenever you're ready.
My name is Chad Wagner. I'm the pastor of the Excelsior Springs Church. I'm going to give 3 reasons in 3 minutes for not masking children. Number 1, according to a recent study at Johns Hopkins, the, quote, research team at Johns Hopkins worked with the nonprofit Fair Health to analyze approximately 48,000 children under 18 diagnosed with COVID in health insurance data from April to August 2020. Our report found a mortality rate of 0 among children without a pre-existing medical condition such as leukemia. So they looked at all the supposed deaths and they found out that there were 0 children that died of COVID. This is Johns Hopkins University. The CDC says that 335 children have died of COVID, but they have not verified whether they died of COVID or with COVID. The CDC's website says, quote, during the 2009 H1N1 pandemic, 358 pediatric flu-related deaths were reported to CDC from April 2009 to September 2010. That's more deaths during the H1N1 flu than during the COVID flu for children. Did you guys mask children during the H1N1 2009-10 flu season? Obviously not, right? Did you quarantine children? Did you send them home? You didn't do any of that. More children died then, according to the CDC, than now. Why are we doing all this now? Reason number 2, according to the New York Times, quote, researchers in Denmark reported on Wednesday, this is November 2020, that surgical masks did not protect the wearers against infection with the coronavirus in a large randomized clinical trial. So they did a big study and they found out that masks did not stop people from contracting COVID-19. There have been numerous studies done for years prior to COVID-19 that have shown that mask wearing does not prevent the transmission of respiratory viruses. I've personally heard many parents tell of how physically, emotionally, and psychologically damaging mask wearing is for children. Mask wearing for children is child abuse. So the fact that, number 1, children are not at risk of death of COVID-19, and number 2, mask wearing does nothing to prevent COVID transmission should be reason enough to stop masking children. If it doesn't harm them, and it doesn't by and large, except if they have leukemia or something, which very few children do, and if masks don't prevent COVID anyway, why are we doing it? But the third reason that I have, and this is most important, is that according to the Bible, it is parents, not bureaucrats, school board members, administrators, or teachers that have the duty, right, and responsibility to train their children and provide for their health and safety. In Ephesians 6:4 it says, and ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6:1 says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. 1 Timothy 5, I got like 20 more seconds.
No, your time is up.
It's the parents' responsibility to provide for the health and safety of their children, not yours.
No, I don't. What's your name?
Ann Winter.
Thank you.
Hey, Leroy, could you move the flag for me, please?
I can, let's say.
Thank you.
Thanks. I have 4 things to say in regards to the issue of masking this school year. First, thank you as school board members for all that you have done this year as administrators. I know these past years have been brutal for you guys, for parents, for everybody, so thank you. The first point in regards to masking, really there's 3 things I feel that masks will help us protect. One is the health of our kids. Previously, with the previous iteration of COVID, it wasn't as contagious. Delta is a whole nother story. As we've seen in all of the news that has been out recently, it's affecting kids at a greater rate than initially. And so that's the first concern, protect our kids' health. That's one of our main jobs here. That's why we put locks on our doors to the schools. We protect our kids. The second thing is to protect in-person schooling. It sucks when everyone gets yanked in and out, in and out, in and out. Let's prevent that. Let's keep in-person schooling as a top priority, because every parent, every teacher, every administrator knows in-person schooling is way better than virtual learning. And given the contagiousness of Delta, I just don't see how we can maintain in-person learning without masks. And so I think that that should be a high priority. And then finally, the third piece is to protect our community. Excelsior Springs does not have high vaccination rates. I think as a school board, we would hate to become, or as a school in general, a group of families that loves this town, we'd hate to become a super spreader. Our schools, we don't want that to be the place that becomes a source of pain for our families, a source of poor health, and poor outcomes for our community. We don't want to shut down again on our businesses. We want to keep those open. I know it's been rough this last year. So those would be my three reasons: protect our kids, protect in-person schooling, and to protect our community from the spread here. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. All right, next up, the superintendent report.
All right, first item I have is the construction update, driven by each of the buildings today. And Cornerstone's looking amazing, got the paving done, just little minor things they're fixing up. Our custodial crew was in there today, moving all the items in, so that's a good sign. That makes it real. And I can't go back to this since Leroy has this up. This is our bond portfolio information. You can see our outstanding P&I. There's 8.4. I do have an updated one as of today. So we did make a couple of payments from items approved at last month's meeting. So our drawdown is now at approximately 6.15 million. So it's where we should be given where we are with the completion of the projects. So, but on the Early Childhood Center, there's some pictures there for you. I don't know, Leroy, if you have those or not, but Early Childhood Center, it looks like a mess when you go out there, but they assure me that it's going to be completed on time. When I went inside, you know, there is a lot of progress being made, but and a lot of people there, so you know, things transform quickly. I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see the new signage on the sign or on the side of the building when it gets done, etc. And it's going to be great to have that school for the young kids. Elkhorn Elementary, beautiful transformation out there. You can see in the picture of the top left corner, that's the entry to Elkhorn now, and that's since more has been done. They've done the paving. There's some nice accent there if you look at the bottom right that they've done that kind of blends in with Cornerstone a little bit.
Same color.
Huh?
It's kind of same color. They got the Cornerstone in it.
Yes.
Should have them all across the schools, right?
Right.
Everything should match.
And then when you go inside, the new LED lighting and the nice ceiling tiles, and they're doing the flooring. I mean, Elkhorn's going to look like a brand new school. I mean, it really will. It's absolutely beautiful. And again, they're not finished yet, but the new FEMA shelter is amazing. They're already putting the sound dampeners on the walls and things like that. So they've really come along. But that's going to be a beautiful school, and you know, I had the luxury going out there after you hired me for this position before this remodel occurred, so I've gotten to see how drastically different the facility looks. All right, so that is construction. Just the next updates, just another quick reminder I mentioned to you in the July meeting. The convocation is August 20th. It's Friday, and our plans are about completed. Keeping them somewhat secret because we want to have a good time with the teachers, but it should be an exciting time. I want to get them revved up and excited for an in-person learning school year. And then the last piece I wanted to spend a little bit of time on is legislative update. I plan to do these on a monthly basis, and I just wanted you to know a couple of pieces of legislation that passed. House Bill 349 was signed by the governor in July, and this is a voucher program, and so we do now have vouchers in Missouri schools. It is currently limited to 25 million in total vouchers. That'd be equate to about 3,900 students in the state, and they could use those, and they can go to private institutions with those if they so choose. With anything like this, some districts will lose students, some will gain, and you know, virtual courses like MOCAP might gain, for example, with those, and to pay that cost. This does not start this year. Collection will take place this year. In other words, when people donate money or purchase tax credits, that becomes the donation, if you will. It'll cap up to 25 million. And a companion bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 86, was signed at the same time, and basically what it did, it created educational assistance organizations. And so this will be the group, if you will, that will solicit applications and pay out the funds for those students to attend those. Just something to watch. This is something that could grow. Programs like this can be hard on public schools because money gets diverted from the public institutions, and you take a little bit away here and there. We still have to keep the same number of schools going, same number of lights, even if we just lose a few students. But we lose that money to pay the bills when that happens. And then point number 3, I just wanted to note this failed legislation can be a predictor of future past legislation. So I wanted to note that there were several charter school bills on the docket. They didn't pass, but those are, you know, basically would pull money away from existing school districts. In this case, St. Louis, Kansas City, to divert those funds to private and parochial institutions. Again, that bill currently would have only been for charter school, where charter schools exist in the counties that they currently exist. But if charter schools spread into additional counties, that type of bill would apply there as well. And let's see, virtual learning. There was a bill out there that for kids to be able to choose virtual learning. And the problem with a bill like that is the virtual learning company, let's say MOCAP, can take the kid and take the money, but if they don't feel like they want to keep the kid, they can kick the kid out, but they get to keep the money, and they come back to us and we don't have the money for the kid. So again, they create budgeting problems when they do this sort of thing. So there's better, you know, in my opinion, there's better ways to do that. If you know, the money should follow the kid, I guess. Accreditation. You know, when you interviewed me, I talked about the accreditation system being a dumpster fire, and more specifically, I talked about the testing program aspect of accreditation being a dumpster fire. In that, well, we've had 2 years of COVID that's really been detrimental to testing, and then prior to that, we'd had you know, 3 different tests and 4 different sets of standards. We had tests that didn't match the standards we were supposed to teach, to the point where even DESE said, hey, we're going to give you these scores, don't use them. And we're not even going to use them. We're not even going to assign you an accreditation score. That's how messed up the accreditation system is right now. But with that being said, there were still accreditation bills out there that would just, one of them would automatically say that the bottom 5% of school districts would be unaccredited. Well, that's about 26 schools. Another one was 10%. And then if you were deemed to be unaccredited because you fell in that 5 or 10%, your school would have to close, and you'd have to send those kids somewhere else and work with private entities to help come up with a plan. And so, again, it'd be one thing if our accreditation system was humming along and working like it should, but it's just not there. So, you know, fair is fair. There, again, funding bills. There was one to eliminate personal property tax. I don't like paying personal property tax. I get why somebody would come up with that, but That's about $1.8 billion in revenue in the state. So, and you know a significant portion of that goes to the 521 school districts in the state. And so I think what people don't realize is, you know, as a school district, we're mandated to pay our bills. And if that revenue was taken away, we'd have to raise your residential property taxes and business property taxes to cover that bill, because we have to pay our bills. So I don't think people think about that when they're proposing these bills. I don't know if you might even want to call that a shell game. A variety of bills out there regarding school district or school boards, such as recalls. Being able to recall a school district or school board member is an example. And then obviously the last one here, there was a bill regarding open enrollment, which would allow kids to go to any school anywhere. And again, the difficulty with that is it's hard to plan, it's hard to staff, not knowing who's going to show up. And then again, if the money follows the child, you know, we have set costs in schools. We can't be that quick to change things if kids leave us and go somewhere else, or more kids come to us. All of a sudden, we need to build a new school or something like that. You know, things just don't work that quickly, and so it's difficult. So, anyway, that's the legislative update. Does anybody have any questions for me on the legislative update?
So currently, right now, with charter schools, what type of accountability system is in place?
Yeah, no,
is there?
That's a great question. You know, charter schools do not have the same accountability system. They don't have an accreditation aspect to them. They're not held accountable how they perform on test scores. And last I heard from Desi was there's only one charter school that even performs at the level at public schools, and that's the Kaufman Foundation Charter School. But most don't. And again, they're not held accountable for that. And the other thing about charter schools too, they can take your kid, take the money, they can kick your kid out and keep the money. And a lot of people don't understand that. You know, people think, oh, I'm going to take my kid to this charter school, it's going to be great. But the charter school doesn't have to, let's say, put up with a problem child. They can just kick them right out, and they end up back at their existing school, but that school has less money now.
Right, yeah.
So. All right.
Any other questions? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on. Discussion and action items. First one is approval of the 21-22 safe return to in-person learning plan. Dr. Thomas.
Well, if it pleases the board, I wanted to go ahead and introduce the document that's called Safe Return to In-Person Learning. And we did convene a committee for our COVID task force, much like we did last year. We have some new members. We kind of reorganized it. Kenny Manley on the board represents the board on the committee. Myself, we have our district nurse, Laney Hurt, as well as Dr. Bullimore, our Career Center Director. And two of those members also have kids in the district. So we got some good representation as far as school impact, parent impact. And we did have a good meeting today with Clay County too. Dr. Hucks and I were able to meet with Clay County and kind of iron out some aspects of this plan that we've started with. So this document that I would put forth for your consideration is really about kind of setting the tone for how we plan to go about moving forward with the school year. And it deals with things such as what types of considerations do we have to make to have a safe school year. And we talk about everything from a traditional schedule to a hybrid schedule to a virtual schedule, understanding the fact that depending on the health and wellness of both our staff and our students, each of those might be necessary. However, we do believe that it's most important to have students in school. We want to have our staff here, we want to have our kids here, and that's going to be the best educational environment for kids. So, that being said, that's kind of the basis of this document, is to try to set up the premise for how we went about what it was going to take to meet some of the needs of our staff and our students and our community. And so we took a look at those different items. It's also important for the State Department of Education that we have this document in place so they understand that we've actually taken it seriously, and we have a committee that overlooks and oversees these things. So this was really the premise, and I would ask if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those. And this is what we would ask for approval for this evening.
So kind of looking at what you put together here, if a teacher has come down with COVID and they're vaccinated, or they've been vaccinated, then they do not have to be quarantined, is that right?
That's true, and that's something I have a protocol sheet that we can go over as well. That's a little separate from that, but there's a couple different tracks you can take depending on for quarantine. So the way it's identified for school is you are close contact if you're within 3 feet of each other for more than 15 minutes, okay? So if you're identified as being a close contact, then they'll make the determination of were both people wearing masks. If both people are wearing masks, then the other person doesn't have to quarantine unless they show symptoms, okay? Or if one person isn't wearing a mask and the other one is, then that person would have to quarantine, unless the person's vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, you do not have to quarantine. If you do quarantine, then there's some different ways you can get back. So you can get back if you have a negative test after the 5th day of your quarantine. You may be all 14 days on quarantine. So it kind of depends. There's some different variables associated with it. But I think the key is if we take a look at the different opportunities available to us through a quarantine, we can provide those to our staff and our students and parents and make sure that we're coming up with a plan that kind of mitigates the risk the best we can, but also gives people the most flexibility in how to be in class the longest. So that's really what the approach is. So did you want me to talk about this protocol first?
Let's do the safe return vote and discussion first.
Okay.
I make the motion to approve. All right, we have a motion to approve the 21-22 safe return to in-person learning by Rick. Do we have a second? Second by Kaylin. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0. Okay, now you can go to the 21 protocols.
The protocol sheet, it's up on the screen there, is really an example of the approach we're trying to take when it comes to risk mitigation with COVID. So one of the important aspects about COVID is that there is no one thing that's going to lessen the risk for anyone to receive COVID. There's no one thing. So what we're trying to do is how can we come up with as many different strategies as possible? And we talked about this last year, if you remember. We want to scaffold the different mitigations strategies, right? So we talk about health and hygiene. We talk about what do we do with our facilities. We talk about the fact that we take students' temperatures and staff temperatures before they come into the building. We talk about hand washing. We talk about social distancing. We talk about how we handle a case when there is someone who's symptomatic in the building. How do we handle that situation? How do we advise students to kind of self-monitor, or parents to self-monitor before they even come to school? These are all important strategies that kind of contribute to what we hope to be the lessening of transmission rate through COVID throughout our schools. So I know that everyone likes to focus on face masks, and that I know that gets probably the most notoriety. But at the same time, it's only one of many different factors that we try to take into consideration that we found to be effective and useful in our strategy. At this time, our recommendation is for highly recommending everyone to wear a face covering. Everyone. That's the recommendation. Everyone is highly recommended to do it. And if you have questions what that means, I'd be happy to go through every possible scenario. But at the same time, I think the more people that do wear face coverings, the better it's going to be for slowing the transmission of it. Now, I also believe there's different areas we can take as far as how we social distance within the classroom. If we can keep people from being within 3 feet, it's less likely they're going to be quarantined. Our high school students, if they are vaccinated, they wouldn't have to be quarantined unless they showed symptoms, right? So again, we're trying to look at ways that keep kids in school. I do believe we're aligned almost exactly with Clay County Health Department currently. So we had a long talk with them today, a conference call with Dr. Hux was on there, our district nurse was on there, some of the representatives from Clay County Health, and I feel like we had a really good conversation about what it's going to take to keep kids in the classroom and to focus on education. And every single person on that call agreed that we're going to be best served to have kids in class. And so I think that's what our goal is, and we're trying to come up with a plan that is going to help facilitate that.
So on the recommendation, is that recommended mask inside and outside?
I would highly recommend people wear a mask.
And they are required on the buses.
That's a good point. On transportation, it's much the same if you were to fly on a plane. You have to wear a mask on a plane. Buses under that same jurisdiction, so any riding on a school bus would require wearing a mask. That's not something that the school district has any say over. So that's just one of those things we're gonna,
That's a federal.
that is a
mandate.
federal mandate. You will wear a mask when you ride a bus.
What did you say that the vaccination rate was for our zip code again?
Well, that's a good question because it actually came up today. We asked that question. And 65% of residents in 64024 have had initiated their vaccine. 65%.
Those eligible.
Those eligible. That's 16 and up, actually. So you can have them from 12 to 15 would be eligible, but they didn't have statistics for that age range. But 16 and up, they had 65% had initiated their vaccines and 57% had completed their vaccines. And I don't know specifically all of the zip codes throughout Clay County, but I would venture to bet that's one of the higher vaccination rates probably in the county. I thought that was pretty decent for right now.
Surprising and impressive, I thought.
I thought so too. I think that shows a willingness of people in our community to at least entertain the fact of being vaccinated. And again, if they are vaccinated, they would not have to quarantine even if they're a close contact to a positive person. And that's a pretty enticing reason to have the vaccination if nothing else.
So I think we've kind of discussed this, talked about this a little bit, but being a teacher and let's say that you've been vaccinated, but yet you have a breakthrough case and you come down with COVID, you're on leave, you're using your own personal sick days then, right?
That's correct. So they did have COVID leave was something the federal government made available last year, but that has since expired. So if staff were to have to go on leave for illness, that would be constituted the same as any other type of illness. So yes, they would have to use their sick leave, their personal leave, or their vacation, depending on their employment status.
Okay.
And if Clay County changes, we follow their recommendation.
I always like to say this at the very end, is it's flexible, guys. Like, if you remember last year, think about how much changed in a given week, in a given day. We would have a meeting, and sometimes it was different by the time we were done with our meeting. So, all of this sounds great. We're gonna do everything we can to do what's right for our kids and our staff. But at the end of the day, if enough people are getting sick, we have to change, right? And at the end of the day, if no one is getting sick, we can also change.
Yep.
So things can lessen and things can tighten up, and it's gonna be 100% dependent upon how many people are ill. That's it. So we think this is a good plan. If it works out and things are going well, great. If it goes better than we ever thought, hey, we can probably remove some of our restrictions, right? If it's going worse than we thought, we're gonna have to tighten them up and maybe masks become mandatory. That's definitely possible. Maybe we have to go back to a hybrid schedule. Maybe we end up all virtual, depending, but that's gonna be dependent upon our infection rates and how people are handling it, and are people able to stay in school or not? And we'll try to adjust to that the best that we can.
Okay. Do we need to approve this protocol?
You don't, but this is something I'll make available. I'm gonna send this out to, as long as you guys are okay with the premise of all of this, I would like to send this out to all of our families. I'll probably do that tomorrow when I get into the office, and I'll send that out via email to all of our families. I'll also post it on our website and our social media, and we'll try to get as much information out there as we can. It's one of those things where you don't want to get it out too soon because things change so much, but you also want to give people information before school starts, so we're trying to find kind of that sweet spot, and I thought it might be good to at least present it to you this evening and then communicate it tomorrow.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Tomlinson? All right.
Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, thanks, Jared.
Moving on to the 22 through 27 CSP update. Dr. Huss.
I'll try to be brief here. I've already brought to your attention that we're going to be redoing our CSP plan, working on that with our stakeholders this year. So we will be establishing a committee with hopefully all stakeholders involved. Right now, the dates of meetings will be October 19th, 26th, November 2nd and 9th, from 5 to 8:30. We'll post those up and follow the procedures as needed. The process is very involved, and this is a big document. It's an important document. It becomes our guide for the next several years. And it used to be comprehensive school improvement, now it's called continuous school improvement because they want it to be a living document that we continually review and recommit to or revise as necessary. So we'll be doing things like, I don't know if you can read this from out there, but a SWOT analysis, but that's, you know, determining our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, develop or recommit to beliefs, revise or recommit to our mission and vision, identify 4 to 6 top priorities, create SMART goals, and I've in parentheses noted what SMART goals are. They're specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Develop action steps, measurements and metrics, communication strategy, and obviously monitor and adjust annually. So we're going to use a company to help us facilitate this. This is a very in-depth process, and all of our stakeholders want to be able to participate. So we'll have a facilitator so that none of us are tied up with facilitation and we can actually participate too. Okay, so that's why we're going to do that. And the cost for that facilitation is about $7,200. This doesn't require approval. This was something I brought to you last month, and I told you I would be finalizing some of these details and bringing it back to you. So I just wanted you to know. So this was just discussion item. So if anybody has any questions, comments, if not, we can move to the next item.
All right. Anybody have questions, comments on it? All right. Moving on to the ESSER funds.
All right, ESSER funds. This stands for emergency, relief funds, if you will. I'll kind of start from the very bottom, point number 12. This is ESSER 3, and we're eligible to receive just under $3 million in these ESSER funds. You might have heard of the CARES Act, that money that's been pushed out by the federal government. That's what this is. So ESSER 3, this district's eligible for about $3 million. We obviously want to take advantage of that money, because if we don't, someone else will, right? But I also wanted you to know in ESSER 1 and 2, we had received $322,000 and then $1.3 million. So in total, it's right now, if we apply for this $3 million, the district will have received about $4.6 million. Now, we have not received all that yet, because to receive this money, you have to have the expense first. This is a reimbursement, so you can't get the money and then spend it. But you can apply it to expenses. So we had a ESSER committee, and we met. That's part of the requirement of applying for this fund. So we had various stakeholders, board members, teachers, kids, administrators on this committee, and we ultimately landed on how to expend these funds, and we had already ideas of how we should, but I want to say there's one caveat in this. In the previous ESSER fund expenditures, you could accept the money and the district could choose what they wanted to spend it on. Here, they say 20% of it has to go for learning loss. They, based on last school year, lots of kids weren't in and so on. So for us, that's about $600,000, and we'll be using those funds to cover things like year-round subs, will be social workers, recovery room teachers, instructional coaches, interventionists, and so on. So that's what those funds will be for. Also, some curriculum and assessment writing is in there as well. The remaining 80%, if you look at our long-range plan, we had bond funds. We used it to build Cornerstone. We used it to renovate Elkhorn, and create the early childhood center out of the former Westview Elementary. Various things like that we've done with those funds. Well, as we all know, when we do a long-range facility plan, there's more projects on there than we can afford to pay for. So we're going to use this $2.4 million to hit some of those projects that are still on the list. And we have some confinement in how we can spend it. So one of the things we can spend money on with regard to capital projects is indoor air quality, right? That's an aspect, a concern for COVID and so on. Well, we have HVAC in the Performing Arts Center and the gym that are end of life and or problematic. And so we've solicited estimated costs, and for those, as well as building automation systems for the high school, the career center, central office, the support services building, and others, it comes up to about $2.4 million. So we will, seek bids on that and return and come back to you with that. Where I'm not saying tonight that I'm going to go spend this money. I'm going to bring that back to you, follow board policy where you approve those projects. But I want you to know that's where this committee landed. I do want to note that the building automation system, because it creates efficiency in the HVAC system, that it over a 15-year period, it's noted just under $1 million savings in energy costs. Why 15 years? Because that's the guaranteed time for this equipment. I mean, it should last beyond 15 years, but we have the guarantee in the first 15. So that's why you see the 15 years. So applications are due August 23rd. So we will be submitting our applications soon for that. Anybody have any questions on the ESSER funds?
No questions?
That, the wrestling room, it doesn't have HVAC, right? Is that part of the gym?
No, it's probably separate. It's probably got its own.
Okay.
Be my guess.
Yeah, this is just for the gymnasium.
How is the system with the middle school? Is it operable and working all right?
So that was one of the systems we looked at.
Yeah.
That system alone would be a couple $1 million, and or actually more than that. It was beyond what we could expend in this. So that will probably end up being a bond project in the next bond cycle.
Okay.
Any other questions on those funds? All right. Next up, set the 2021 tax rate hearing date. Dr. Brooks.
All right. So I'm going to ask that this board recommends or consider a tax rate hearing as required by law. We do when we set the tax rate for September 27th at 5:30 here at the central office. And
Here at the boardroom or central office?
Central office is
Okay.
where it's been located.
That's fine.
If you want to do it here, we can certainly
Nope.
change that.
You just said here at the central office.
Oh, I said here at the central office.
I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. I get at Raytown, the board
One in the
was in
old.
the central office, so I gotta get out of that mindset. I'm not in Raytown anymore. Thankfully, I'm here. So a couple of things just to note. Clay County became a first-class county this year, and one of the things that allows them to do is take an extra month to determine assessed valuation. And so normally we would have this meeting at the end of August. We would have this tax rate hearing. So Ray County is not a first-class county, for example. I already have received the assessed valuation from that county, but I don't have from Clay yet, so we can't do that. And I've already been told by the clerk it will not come in until sometime in September. So in past years, you would have to have this done by September 1, but because of the first class change, it's now October 1. And because our school district is in both Ray and Clay, this will default for Ray as well. So that is one of the main changes there. And I will tell you, as I'm sure everybody in here would expect, Kenny Manley would know this, prices on property have gone up quite a bit. That increases the assessed valuation. And in Ray County, for example, let's see, I think I wrote that down somewhere. It was pre-BOE, which BOE is not Board of Education in this case, it's Board of Equalization. It was $55 million, and after Board of Equalization review, it was basically $53.8. And then what I'm seeing in Clay County is $214 million. If you add those together, you're around 260 million. Last year, the after Board of Equalization assessed valuation was 245 million. So I expect this to be 5 or 10 or $15 million higher in assessed valuation. And so that comes into play when we're determining our tax rate, because there's what's called the Hancock Amendment, and it only allows us to collect what we normally collect plus consumer price index, which is like 1.4, 1.6% this year. So we'll have to get our calculators out and figure all that out and come up with a proposed tax levy to put forward to this board. So, any questions on that?
So we need an approval for a September 27th, 5:30 PM central office tax rate hearing.
So moved.
First by Darren,
Second.
second by Kalen. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0. All right, next up, naming committee.
So, board policy requires a name and committee anytime we are going to name a new facility or change the name to an existing facility. And stop me in my tracks if this has already been done, but the old Early Childhood Center, where we have our board meetings, it's my understanding does not have an official new name, but calling it the old Early Childhood Center and having the new Early Childhood Center might be a little confusing, especially when people are Googling. So I'm proposing that we create a naming committee.
For this building?
Yes, for this building, to come up with a new name for it. An example might be the Support Services Center or something like that, but that'd be up to the committee. But just something to distinguish it officially from what it was, because the confusion that I can see continuing to occur. So that's my recommendation. Anybody have any questions?
You'll take care of that, so. All right, somebody else finally. Approval of Clay County Children's Fund contract renewal. Dr. Gross.
No offense, but.
Okay, well, thank you. Children's Fund, yes, I do have the most recent contract attached to this update, but I did want to highlight a few things. I'm very excited about the funding and where this is going to take us this year. As you know, this is our third year with Children's Fund, and we're in our second year of this particular grant cycle. But of course, each year we have the opportunity to look at the grant and maybe make some changes or maybe even ask for more money. And we're very, very proud of ourselves. With last year, we had about $583,000 to expend, and we expended all, you can see the numbers there, all but $3,785.51. So we were very, very proud of what we were able to do with the funding for our students' mental health and social emotional awareness and that health as well. But we had some things that we started to think about as we're moving into the 21-22 school year and thinking about what life was like last year. And, you know, many of our students being at home and maybe not getting the services that they need, or doing our best to do those virtually, and thinking ahead to what life might be like when we are all together again, which of course is our plan and our hope for this year, to be back to normal, or as normal as we can get. So in thinking about those things and just student behavior and some of the supports that we think they will need and the challenges that they will face as we come back together, we did work with Synergy Services to create a behavior framework and to also implement some behavior interventionists and an analyst to be able to support our kids and really work with some of the mental health challenges that we foresee happening that will come out as behaviors. And so what we did was we went back to the board and asked for a little bit more money to help support this effort, and we were approved for that. So with all of those numbers there, our allocation for this year will be $703,785.51. So we're very excited for what we anticipate for this year and how to support our students, and are looking forward to this new programming. This morning we unwrapped that with our elementary principals, because it really will focus heavily on K-5, and they're very excited for what we're going to be able to do for them to be able to support kids coming back into the buildings. So I would recommend that the board approve our new contract for Children's Fund.
So moved.
Second.
First by Kaylin, second by Rick. Anybody have questions for Dr. Gross?
No, thank you for doing that.
No questions, no comments? All right, all those in favor? That passes 6-0. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Next up, Early Childhood Center enrollment update. Dr. Gross?
Okay. Well, you saw earlier the pictures that Dr. Huck shared with you with our new early childhood, and we are another thing to be very excited about going into this school year, and just having a bigger building to be able to support our growth. And I just wanted to give you a quick update where we're at. You can see the numbers there. We currently have 7 classrooms with the early childhood. 3 of those are Head Start classrooms, full day. And 4 of those are blended classrooms, so they combine special education students, title students, and tuition students. And those are half-day programs. You can see there where we are at, and we have some kids even waitlisted right now. So we know our program is going to grow. But we also understand that we do have parents sometimes that make that commitment, and then the fall comes and it's time to send their kid, and maybe we don't have the numbers that we thought we were going to have. So in talking with Dr. Hucks, we have decided to just give you an update today and let you know where we are, that we think we're gonna need some more personnel, but we wanna see how school kicks off, especially with, some of the things that are happening with COVID, and, that can keep some families home. So we wanna see where we end up in September, give it a little time, and then we might be coming back to you with a recommendation to add a classroom at the early childhood. That this is what we were longing for, and this is one of the reasons we wanted that bigger building, and so we're on the right track, and it's very exciting, so just wanted to deliver that news to you tonight.
Build it, they will come.
That's right. All right. Anybody have any questions on early childhood enrollment?
Thank you.
Job well done. All right, that wraps up the agenda. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
First by Darren, second by Kenny. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0. Thank you all for coming out. Have a good evening. Drive safe.